How's it going? Welcome to Good Company and welcome back to the Gigafactory. Today is the start of the Industrial Revolution. As you can see, we are going to do a massive redesign on the metal workshop. We're going to be using machines, conveyor belts. We're going to be using everything and it's going to be fully automatic. So I had a couple of goals with this metal workshop actually. I wanted 4 machines making every single component. So rods, screws, gears, mechanical parts, metal frames and the coils, and I wanted it to be fully automatic, so there will be no logistics workers whatsoever in the metal workshop. Everything is automatically going to be taken from the pallet and then automatically placed on another pallet at the end of the factory, and what we come up with is really cool. So go ahead, check to see you are subscribed. Also hit the like button as it really does help out. And if you want to join the workforce and support the channel, you can do so by becoming a channel member and getting your name at the end of the video. So this project was a lot more complicated than anything we've done in the Gigafactory so far. So my idea was to just build it up bit by bit, start with the simple modules. So we're doing the rods to start with and then the screws. The rods only take metal and then the screws only take rods. So did have to find a way of basically feeding the rods into the screws, but also splitting them off because there's other modules, other metal components that use the rods as well. So the rods are initially made in this first room and then they actually make their way around the metal workshop into the second room and are used in there as well. But also they are actually used elsewhere in the factory too, so they need to end up on the final pallet as well. So it was kind of a challenge actually to find a way of just splitting them off into where they need to go. And really this is kind of like a turning point in my brain as well as the factory because it really helped me understand how to use the splitters and the mergers in the most effective way. So I did say at the start of the video that I wanted 4 machines making each of the modules. However, with the screws I have gone for 8 machines just because the amount of screws that we need eventually is, well, we need a lot of screws basically. So 4 machines just wasn't going to be enough. And with the rods, because the rods are actually used in the other components as well, we need to basically up the production of that as well. So that's why we've got 8 machines in this first room for each of the modules, and it does work out pretty well. However, it takes up a lot of space, and this is why I had to spread this metal workshop out over 2 rooms. I did want to do everything in this first room, but as you can see, it's just not going to work. So just routing around the conveyor belts just to get the metal into the first couple of rows of machines, and it works out pretty well. Again, just doing it bit by bit, just making sure everything is working in this initial room before moving on to the next one. So I do put a conveyor belt over to the second room using those buffers. Again, the buffer module things for the conveyor belts are a game changer. Just put them at regular intervals down your conveyor belt and it increases the throughput of the conveyor belts so much. 100% worth doing. And to be honest, without them I don't think this would have worked as well as it does. So just setting up the final pallets for our components. This is where everything is going to end up and finally be distributed around the factory. Just building up bit by bit, just trying to keep things simple and manageable for now. If you've been watching the Gigafactory, then you know I've had problems in the past with things getting stuck. So just wanted to make sure everything was basically correct before sending the components and the materials through the conveyor belts really. So that was also up the other end. I thought it's time to actually just send these rods and screws and get them over onto the final pallet, make sure they can get there, and then we can start thinking about the other components in this second room. So they were making their way to the final pallet as expected, which was a huge relief. And here we are moving on to the metal frames. So these take the rods and the screws that we're already making. So we do delete one of the conveyor belts just to reroute the screws and rods and make sure they can get both onto the final pallet and into these machines here. So again, the splitters and the mergers, really useful, and an actual game changer. In the early access, we wouldn't have been able to do things like this, and again, we managed to squeeze 4 machines in there. Had a little bit of a hop over using one of the overhead segments over the machine, but I think that turned out really cool. It looked really good, and I like it when things look a little bit messy, because it just draws the brain, and trying to figure out what's going on is, I don't know, it's quite fun just to try and follow the stuff around where it's going. Saying that, this room was so small, it was a proper squeeze to get everything in, and I think that was good because it does give you a challenge and really does make you think about the best way you can use the conveyor belts and the different sections. And I don't know, I find it really fun and satisfying trying to squeeze things into these tight rooms. So did put another pallet down in the second room, buying in more metal, and we also bring over compound sundries. These are for the mechanical parts. I would have liked everything to come from the very first room. However, it just wasn't feasible to do that. So that's why we had to put a second pallet down. Just had a little problem with the conveyor belts and machine making parts. They were just running out. So we do actually make a little machine to automatically make those in a few episodes time, I believe. But it was a little bit of a problem because I just had to keep going over there and picking up more conveyor belts and stuff. So here we are putting down the mechanical parts. Again, 4 machines making these. I've squeezed them right into the corner just so we don't have any wasted space whatsoever. Did sneak that conveyor belt through into like the other half of the room and through a very convenient gap. And this is why you have to use all of the space available, because if those metal frame machines were one square up, that little gap there wouldn't have been available and the whole thing wouldn't have worked. So I do think we've used the space really effectively here, and it does work out in our favor quite a bit actually. And I would say it's forward planning. It's not forward planning, it's just me trying to squeeze everything up as close as possible, and it just kind of works out in the end. So we do have to make gears and we do have to make coils as well, and as you can see, we are running out of space. So we are doing the gears at the moment. These are the 4 that I've put down here. The gears, they only have to go into the mechanical parts and then onto the final pallet, so it's not too much. I don't know what the ratios are of these machines. I'm gonna assume the mechanical parts take twice as long to make as the gears, so having the equal amount of machines for each is fine. And I don't think I even thought about it for the whole of this, to be totally honest. When we come to our component automated workshop, then yeah, we do have to start thinking about ratios and get a little bit more in depth in what's going into what. But for now, this project was kind of just like, get it working, sort it out after if it's not working properly. So just trying to route the gears into the mechanical parts and onto the final pallet as well. I did notice as well some of the rules on the splitters and mergers were starting to get set automatically, but they didn't cause us any problems, so I just left them as they were. I think the metal frames started popping up in random places, but like I said, didn't mess us up at all, so I just left them. Didn't want to go around changing it just in case things broke. So here we are moving on to the final component, the coils. Like I said at the start of the video, I really wanted to do 4 machines for each of the components. However, the coils, it was just a step too far. I tried to squeeze 2 into that little space down there. It just didn't work out. So as you can see, took a little bit of work trying to get the conveyor belt out of that little corner. So we had to use the overhead segments to get the coils out of that corner and, well, basically close to the final pallets. Did put another machine making coils here as well. Again, it took a little bit of work just to try to find the correct layout and also get the materials that we needed over to the coils. The coils actually use metal and plastic, so we did have to buy some plastic onto that pallet in the corner there. And like I said before, it would have been cool to have all of the material coming from the first room, but I don't know how that would have worked out at all. Saying that, looking back, maybe we could do that. Maybe we might revisit this in the future, because I feel like I've just had an idea watching this back. So we do eventually get metal and plastic over to the other coil machine and get everything routed around and working, and finally ending up onto the final pallet. However, 2 machines making the coils for me wasn't good enough, so we do find another place to put another one in. So just finishing up the 2 coils on here, all working correctly. As you can see, lots of coils coming out of that first machine, and you can't really see the coils coming out of the second machine, but they are. I feel like these machines are really quick at making coils. However, with the amount of coils we eventually need in the future, I don't think 3 machines is enough. I swear I've said this so many times. We're just not making enough of anything. So here we are, just placing down the final machine. I say that, need to go over and get some more machine parts before we do that. So here we are. There's the last final space in the first room making coils, and I thought, you know what, I can't be bothered to try and fit it in anywhere else. Let's just go for it here. We'll route it around onto our other main conveyor belt and get them over as basically as quick as we can. So that's what we're doing here. Fairly simple, loads of coils coming out, and then they flow over to the other side all correctly. I did wonder why the rods and the screws were stopped. I thought I'd messed up somewhere, but it's purely because the pallets at the end of the line have filled up, and because there's no space anywhere now, the machines just won't produce anything until space becomes available. So I did have a little bit of a panic, thinking the whole thing had broken. I just wasted my time. I'd have to go through and troubleshoot everything, and it just wasn't the case. It just wasn't enough space on the pallets. So I'm just trying to set up some of the courier routes just to make sure it was working correctly, which it does, which is all good and fantastic. And I do actually do the other courier routes off camera, because me doing courier routes is not the most interesting thing to look at. So here it is, the final metal workshop. We've got the first room making rods, screws, and then we've got one of the coils in there as well. Works really well, looks really cool as well, but I think the second room is probably my favorite. So thank you for watching. Thank you to the workforce. Stay safe, have fun. I'll see you on the next one.